Woodworking machinery can cause serious injury. Always read and understand the user manuals for all equipment used. Remember, dust, fumes, liquid, sharp or heavy moving objects can be deadly. Always wear appropriate personal protective equipment or PPE. Any omission of PPE during this presentation is to aid communication and is not an endorsement of the practice. The Nova Woodturners Guild, or NWG, its authors, presenters, and producers assume no responsibility or liability for accidents or damages resulting from the information conveyed within this presentation. Only you can keep yourself safe. Please do. If you're unsure, don't do it.
Okay.
Good morning, Dave. We're going to make a goblet today. Basic piece of wood we're starting off is approximately 3 inches square, 8 inches long. It's cherry. It is not dry, but it's not green either. I find that much better than something that's too dry, it's too splintery. From there on, I'm not going to do too much talking. We're going to be doing turning. And that's how it's going to be. So, I'll get this set. We have to find the center on the ends from the corners, mark it. I center punch each center. You take your center, you drive center, make sure it's not going to slip when you're partway through. Set it up in the lathe. Start with a roughing gouge, we're going to make a cylinder out of it. I better put the tool rest in first, it'll work better. Tool rest just about your center height. And here we go. After we run it a little, make sure that's tight. Tends to come loose on your driving. There we have our cylinder. We have knots. We have a little defect there that I don't think that's going to bother us. Knots aren't going to bother us at this point in time. Now I have to make a tenon on the end that's going to go in the chuck. Tenon needs to be sized for the jaws on your chuck. This is a Techno-tool chuck. The standard jaws have a little I don't know what to call it, a ridge here on the jaw that I'll make a groove that it fits in so it holds it rigid. 2 and a little bit, quarter or something, as long as I get somewhere near there. Okay. Now I'm going to make the little groove and I'll show it. I'll show it after I get it made. We've now cut the groove in to hold the piece securely in the chuck. Now I take the drive center out of the lathe and put the chuck in. Setting up to do the hollowing of the goblet itself. I'm going to use a shallow fluted gouge, spindle gouge with a fingertip. Ground back edge, some people call it Irish grind. I find it very good for hollowing, up to a certain depth. To be too heavy-handed. Make small cuts. The leverage from the chuck jaws, we're 8 inches away from the chuck jaws. And we're only working on a wooden grip. It's not like something more solid. This is in-grain hollowing. this tool I can use a drag cut, or I can use a forward motion on this end grain. It's a very versatile tool. I'm about 2/3 of my depth. I might change tools. It's getting chattery, but we'll see. I have to check make sure my chuck hasn't loosened up here any. Okay. I'll take a measurement. Can't get the bottom just simply. Okay. 2.5. The overall outside, we're aiming a little around 3 inches. It's not particular. I'd like the actual cup of the goblet to be something close to that same number. Put a mark there, mark about 1/2 inch from the bottom, and that gives us about a 4-inch stem. It should look pretty good. It should look suitable. Okay, I'm going to get another tool for hollowing. This is a one-way tool. One way calls it a termite. It's a ring tool specifically for hollowing. End grain hollowing. Presentation of the tool is about a 45-degree angle on the side, so the tool is virtually cutting on the lower edge of the ring. Measuring the depth. Yes, we're very close to 3. That means we're deep enough. Now, I'm going to get an outside contour, and then I'll go back and refine the hollowing. I want to support what I have so we don't have any movement. So we put this cone that threads right onto the live center and keeps everything concentric. Then if you have a little catch, everything's not for waste. because a catch can happen to anyone at any time. Okay, so now we're back to the outside of a goblet is a spindle type turn. That's what we're going to end up with when we're finished. Of course, I turned away my mark, so I have to keep checking, but we're good. Now, we have to leave stock in the stem until I'm completely finished with the hollowing. If you get the area at the bottom of the goblet too thin before you finish the hollowing, the grain will break out at the bottom of the goblet. And then you're finished. So, we go. I'll make sure my chuck is still tight. And we go back and we'll refine the hollowing to get it match the outside. There's no reason why you couldn't do this part before you hollowed. I happen to get my hollowing started first off. But there's no reason why you couldn't refine, not to the finished point, but your outside profile, as long as you don't get your stem too fine. I'm going to need this later, so I'll just take it out of the head, out of the tail stuff here. Now, I want calipers, because it's with calipers that we're going to measure our thickness as we go. It's nice to be, because you're going to be able to feel the inside and the outside of your goblet, you want to get it fairly accurate in the thickness. Otherwise, you'll feel it. Somebody will feel it. So, I'll go back to the gouge. Very lightly, we'll take starting at the mouth. mustn't get too confident that you know where you are, because all of a sudden you'll be thin. So we're a little better than a 1/16 of an inch. These calipers are quite nice because you measure at one end and you look at the other, and you can get a thickness that you can see. And you have to remember, when you sand, you're going to lose some thickness, so you've got to keep that in the back of your mind. Or the front of the mind. Close. Compressed air is vital for hollowing, I find. We're still thick, which is better than being too thin. Your wind isn't enough compressed air. A little more. I think that feels okay. We're going to refine the little ripples you have with sandpaper. That's once you get down, so you're only going to remove a few thousandths of an inch. It's sandpaper work. That's how I do it. So we've got about we're down almost a inch and a half. So we're progressing. Back to my ring tool. These ring tools, the termite tool, have two sides that are sharp, but one side is more aggressive than the other. I don't know whether the camera can see it, but this side here is the aggressive side. And it's got to do with where the tool is presented to the wood inside the hole, which works best. And the only way you figure that out is practice and mistakes. It cuts relatively aggressively, so you have see that all the shavings I got in that little time. So you have to be prepared to measure before you get in trouble. But we're good. I can see we're good because we're thick. But the goblet is also tapering, so it's difficult to, without measuring and the hole full of shavings, it's difficult. That's what you want to hear. Nice, smooth cutting, not chatter. And it's got to do with the angle your edge is presented to the wood. The spindle carries again. Now, getting close to the bottom of the I'm happy with the inside contour. I'm going to sand the inside, work on this, the mouth first here. I'm going to do a little bit on the mouth. Just refine it. I'll leave well enough alone and use sandpaper. We're getting thin. After all, sandpaper's a cutting tool also. Don't let anybody tell you different. My personal preference is foam back paper. I buy it from sale, which Mill Supplies has a good supply. No matter how hard you sand, you're not burning your fingers. This is 80, by the way. I'm starting off with. Got depth, you can reach right in the bottom, get the whole thing. Otherwise, you have to put your sandpaper on some kind of a stick to get in there. A slotted stick works quite well, so it holds. If you have to get into a hole, I have a stick like this that you slide the paper on. You have to put it on the right way, and that's not the right way. This is the right way, so it doesn't come off. And you wrap it up, then you can put it in and do this affair. And you can get quite deep, but with this depth of hole, you're good with your fingers. Because even though it's in grain, the sides of your goblet inside here are side grain. And it tends to flake out because you can't get the right presentation in there. So, use your sandpaper. How you get to your end result is not as important as the end result. That might not fit into some people's views, but you get your project done. Then 120. You do most of your work. Do your heavy work with the 80. When you have your tool marks are gone, then you can start coming down. And it's always nice clean out your other sawdust, because you might have abrasive laying around in there from the previous paper. That's 180. This is 220. Don't wrap the cloth or something around your finger, just leave it loose. Except for the very bottom, we're not bad. The very bottom needs a little more work. unless you make something solely for competition, you don't have to be particular. Not real particular. Okay. Now, I use two different kinds of sandpaper. This red colored, whatever it is, abrasive, you can't get that smaller than 220. This is aluminum oxide, I believe, so you can get that. I use down to 400. I don't know where you can get it to. It's got a P number on it. That's got a P. Anyway, 220, the blue paper at 220 cuts finer than the red paper at 220. So I go back, I find I get less scratches if I go back to 180 in the blue paper and just give it a quick sand, go off the scale to 400, because I'm not planning to come back to the inside. That's 220, 280. 320. Should do that every time. 400. And if you've got the heavy grits, if you've done your work with them, you shouldn't have too many marks. The 400 will take out the little marks. You're always going to have marks. Sanding marks. Okay. Now, I have a little tiny crack in the grain here, which I'm going to glue before I go any further, because it's going to give us trouble. So we're going to stop there for a minute while we find glue. Then I'm going to put thin AC on so it doesn't develop into anything we don't want. And it's just a matter of giving a little shot of AC. And in this instance, because I don't want to wait too long, I'm going to give it some accelerator. And we're not held up for 5 minutes or something. Come on, accelerator, there. And that should hold it together while we proceed. Now, I'm going to sand the outside here of the goblet so I can continue on down towards the stem. That'll just make a bunch of noise, so we'll just do it later. The base of the the goblet how they were joined the stem. I'll have to refine that to fit the inside sort of thing and to make it flow into the stem. So we won't get down there just yet. I just want to do this upper part. Make sure my curve looks pretty good. Just take a little of that dust. I can't even find the crack on the outside, but I see the little depression on the inside, so we'll get a little of that dust. Put a little dust in the crack. It's not really a crack anymore, it's just a irregularity. Okay. Now, down the bottom. So the last ½ inch of that, I have a ¼ inch to play with to line everything up to the stem. With the stem. Just put this in here lightly so we keep everything. Now, it's best not to put your aluminum right on that wood because it's going to chafe it and we're going to have a gray color on our wood. Painter's tape's a great thing. Try not to overlap the pieces to get extra thickness. Now that's thin now, we can't push that right up, it's just there to steady. Okay. Now we're getting down to the stem and the foot. Refining, make it look right. Now I have to check this bottom. I've got to keep checking that bottom to make sure I don't get too close. Have to leave enough material. Oh yes, I got lots here. I got lots here. This is our thickness as I get down. I've got lots here. Skew gives you a little better surface. Not as much sand. Stem looks a little heavy still. Don't want to get it too light because I want to reverse chuck it. I need to be able to put my maker's mark on the bottom. I'm particular like that. There's lots of material at the bottom still, so when I reverse chuck it, we don't tear that out here. I think that's good. I'll give that a little sand. Little problem with the grain here along the foot. There was a knot there. You can get as fancy as you like on your stem. This is just a very simple illustration. It's nice to have the center of the stem a little bulbous. You don't want that stem straight. It won't look good at all. Just look at glassware and you'll see they're bulbous. Not that you need to copy glassware. I'm going to put a little CA on that, where that little knot is there. I have zapped with CA, the little crack here. I'm noticing quite an interesting grain pattern in that stem. It's cherry. Cherry is a tough wood. It will stand that abrupt change in grain and still keep its integrity, so I'm hoping we'll be fine. Some woods, you had that grain cutting across like that, you would have trouble. You would have trouble down the road, but I think we're okay. So that was 120 or 180. It's best not to try and jump the grits because you will find scratches. By the time you get to 400, you'll find scratches that didn't get taken out. Now, as I said before, this is 180 again, but it stands fine. I find if I don't do this, I've got scratches coming through by the time I get to 400. Which is frustrating. And we're trying not to do this for frustration. Now, I'll wipe that off and have a look and see what problem I have before I go any further. I think we're fine. Great. Little lump of CA that dried after the accelerator was put on. We'll be disappointed if you put finish over it. I have to get something a little... Now, as you can see, we're quite thin. So we have to be careful on the next operation. So, we have a goblet. What now we have to do is we have to turn off our tenon, refine the underside of the foot, and put my maker's mark on. How we're going to do that? I'm going to make a little piece of wood with a tenon on it for this end. I'm going to put painter's tape on the joint, use this center on the tailstock to temper it, and we'll turn that off. And don't drop that on the floor in the meantime. I have a variety of pieces that already have a tenon on. This one seems to be a suitable size to make our driving block. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. So we have an edge on the block that fits hard up against the mouth. We have no way of supporting inside because this is a curve. We're only supporting on the edge. I've had great success with this method of using painter's tape. So we bring the center up. Not terrible tight, but tight. Spin it and make sure everything looks reasonable. It doesn't look reasonable there because the center is not Just have to adjust that a little. The drive center taper on the point is a little bigger than this center, so I just had to make that right. That's close enough. Close enough for our purposes. Now, because you're putting it on a curved surface, it doesn't lay very good. It wants to follow curves, so put on some pieces here. And we'll end up with enough thicknesses to give us some strength. Make sure that's all stuck right to the wood down in the joint. Because once we take the live center away, it's got to support the turning forces out here. And if it feels wobbly, can't do what we want to do. If that was a fit, a parallel fit, so you had support down in there, one layer of paper would do that. Now, Dave, can you move your camera back a little so I can get my... yes, there we are. Otherwise, my position wouldn't have been right. I'm going to touch up my tool on the grinder here. I use woodcut jig. I waste less steel by using the jig. And I get the same angle every time. I find that's a block. It gives me the right setback to get the right angle. If I want to get this is about 40 degrees. If I want to get the 52 or whatever I use on my bow gouge, I just have to slip this the bottom steady here, out some, and that gives me the steeper angle. And that gives me an edge. I'm done. Surface on your foot doesn't want to be flat. It wants to be a little concave, because your piece will sit better over time. Have to make sure that's calm. About a 1/16 of an inch, that's fine. Now, the piece that I glued on the other side, we have a little problem there. Now's the time to fix that. Don't think it's big enough to try and put anything in. It just needs to be glued. A little bit of accelerator. Don't need to go to 80 there because our presentation was perfect with the tool, but I gotta get that CA off. That's a tiny bit out of center right there, but when it's all done, you never know. That's how it wanted to set. Get that outside sanded now. I won't have to steady it with my hand later because I'm going to have to steady things with one hand. Now, we still have the little stub with the tailstock on it, which I have to get down as fine as I dare while I still have support here. Now, if you didn't want to put a maker's mark on it, you're all but done. But we're good. The tape is going to hold us. We can do what we want here, I think, very lightly. Very lightly. This was wobbly, I'd have to support here to do all my sanding. That's why I'm trying to get the outside, because the further you get out here, the more stress you put on everything. There's physics involved in it. Whether you realize it or not, physics is all around us. Now, because all the grades have the same backing on the paper, and when you start cutting them up, you lose what it is. This is why I put the grit on each individual piece. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on. And unless you're going to use a whole piece of paper, which could get expensive, that was how to get around that. Mark every piece. Now, I haven't finished sanding, but I put my maker's mark on now. People have asked me how I do this. That is a spindle gouge, shallow fluted gouge. So I have it ground right to a point. And the sole thing I use this gouge for is putting my maker's mark on. 3 concentric circles. don't normally put them that close to the center, but I did not want to get out any further than I had to stress the tape. Not at this point in time. We got this far, we don't want to do anything silly. So, now I can ready. 320. Take the patient's cast off. And there you have it. Now we'll dab some finish on it. And that's, you can do as much ornamentation as you want here, here, here. The main thing is this area. I have that probably 3/16 of an inch thick. You have to have that because you have to maintain the strength of this. That's all end grain wood, and you have to maintain that strength. The first couple I made, this was my trouble. It broke out right here as I was doing the foot and whatnot. And it's not top heavy in the least. Feel it, Dave. We're done. I'll find some finish.
Yeah, that is pretty fine inside. Yeah.
It's not competition quality sanded, but okay. I use Lee Valley's tung oil polymerized sealer. I just put a little hole in the can, just a very small can. Put whatever I want in one of these little plastic dishes. Try and judge what I want. When the can gets down, put top on tight. When the can gets down to about half or so, I use those bags, finish save bags or whatever. I find they work. Sponge, small piece. Liberal coating, don't be stingy. The piece of wood has all kinds of little coloring of its own in there. It's the beauty about wood. You don't know what's there until you get into it. It's best to sign it before you put the finish on. People have asked me what I use. High-Tech Point V5 Pilot. That's all I can tell you. 0.05 Staples has them, or used to. Seems like there's a lot of stuff not on shelves now. Does not like the oil particularly. If this doesn't work down here, I'll just wait till the oil dries, sand off the mess that I have, and redo it. But it worked. It's good enough. Everybody can see what it is. I don't know what the solvent is. It does not run which is we didn't waste a whole lot of. So the oil's on, wipe it off. Flannel bed sheet. My old channel bed sheet, so it doesn't have all the little fibers in it. Old sheet, even a cotton sheet will work. But you want to use old stuff. If you buy the material at a material store, a sewer store, you won't be happy because all the little fibers that I suppose come out over the years in the washing machine are in your finish. Now, after years of having little bubbles, it's from the end grain, it's for air in the end grain. The temper changes or whatever, and before the finish sets, you end up with little bubbles. Okay. Chop ham cellar bowl wax. Before it, that's what I do. Before it sets up, before the finish sets up, because it doesn't take all that long for that sealer to finish up. If you're going to put multiple coats of finish on the high luster tongue oil, it goes right over the wax. Don't worry about it. You won't even know it's there. Wax every time you put a coat of finish on. Wipe it off good. Don't put this here like this and walk away and come back tomorrow and try to wipe the wax off, because it won't work. You will have to put it in the lathe, and then you can turn the wax off, braise it with a piece of cloth in the lathe to get the wax off, if you leave it overnight. If there's something I'm real fussy with, I'll come back in an hour and wipe it again. And that's how I finish all my pieces. Now we have a little scratch here. Another day, because it's an oil finish, it's repairable, very simple. Another day, I will gently, with 400 paper, just take that out, oil it, wax it, and we won't know it's there. That's it,
great.
folks.
And here we have it. Finished version. And Stuart, I want to thank you on behalf of the Guild for doing this fantastic demonstration. There were so many good points that we got to see, and I really appreciate you taking the time to give us this demonstration. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dave.
And so I'm at Stuart's little studio off of his workshop. And I just wanted to show you some of the great work that he's got in here. Really nice pieces.